I'm going to start with this story. This is my friend Rick. This is back in 2016. And Rick is the only person in my friend group who likes hip-hop music, together with me. And I was showing him this song, and I was like, oh, I want to see his response. I want to see how he responds to that specific drop in a song. But sometimes you're not together, so I thought, all right, I'm going to make an app for it. And this was before I really knew how to make good apps, so it was a bit ambitious. I wanted to do sort of like Periscope, where you could listen to songs together, you could chat, but I had never shipped an app before. So I thought there needs to be a nice profile picture, a section with all these album arts. They need to be tilted a little bit, because otherwise it's too easy or something. 5 different design styles. I was doing all the designs, like sketching, oh, it is going to be this big graph, you're going to navigate through it, all these things that are super difficult to do when you're a pro, let alone a junior. Even more sketches. Push notifications, because like it's super easy to do push notifications, right? If you've never done anything with a backend before, let me do interactive push notifications. Let me make an iMessage app, because everyone uses that. At this point, no one had used the app before, and I was already making all these features that you only want when you have 1,000 or more users, right? Pivoted the app to just doing short stories where you could take a small snippet. And in the end, it worked pretty well, but I just, never really got it in the hands of people. So I just went to App Store Connect today and searched for the name of the app, called Sessions. And as you can imagine, no results. Which is probably something that you're all familiar with, where you work on something for such a long time and then you just never end up finishing it. So this wasn't really working for me. And then I came across this thing where my Apple Watch had broken at that point, and I was using it for workouts. So I would track my runs to see how many kilometers I'd done. But my watch was broken, so I needed something else for it. And there was this 24-hour startup, where basically you make an app or a startup in 24 hours. Hard deadline, like you need to be done in 24 hours. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to make an app to track my runs. Very simple. You just draw on a map what your route was, and then it tells you how many kilometers there were. One specific feature, very basic. I had the feature done in about 2 hours, so I could spend some time doing animations, making it look a little bit nice, but it was also solving a problem for me. And in the end, it ended up being an app that like 17,000 people downloaded. It was free, but it was mostly just something I wanted for myself. But just having this hard deadline and having this very specific focus made it easier for me to actually release this thing. So I thought, okay, maybe there's something here where if I do this approach, it works better for me. And over the years, that kind of grew into my method, what I call the 2-2-2 method, where basically you spend 2 hours on the first prototype of your app. If you cannot think about how you can make it work in 2 hours, just don't do it. It's too complicated. Just move on. Maybe in a year, there's a new API which makes it easier. Then spend 2 days making it ready so that you can share it with your friends. So people who are close to you, who give honest feedback, but also will see through the difficulties and the issues that you're still working on. And then spend 2 weeks making it ready for launch. So after 2 weeks, you have to launch it in some way. The nice thing about 2 weeks is that it's not a lot of time. So you don't have a lot of things you can put in there. So you have to cut features, because otherwise you're just not going to be able to do it. So what it comes down to is basically, first you try to figure out, is this idea possible? Then you try to figure out, is it usable? And then make it launchable. So by keeping this thing in my head every time when I come up with an idea, it's easy for me to think, okay, I don't know how I can do this first version in 2 hours. Okay, I'm just going to skip it. And by doing this process a lot of times, some of my apps stop at the 2-hour mark. Some stop at the 2-day mark. Some stop at the 2-week mark. But you've already done that work for the 2 hours, and maybe you can reuse it later. So I have some examples of that later as well. Okay, I think some of the apps are going to move in. It was not supposed to happen, but those are the special apps. So I wanted to highlight some of the apps I've made over the last 2 years, especially some of the last year, to show how I take this process and actually put it into practice. And for each one, I'm trying to take like some element for like how can you market your app, or how can you validate your idea, or how can you come up with your ideas. So some are probably going to move. Okay, I'm going to take 5 different apps as examples, and these are random ones, but also some of my favorite ones, because they were also the ones that did best, so they make for better stories. So I'm going to start with Suzy. And In 2018, 19, I had a girlfriend who was allergic to oranges, and oranges is not a very common allergy, so not a lot of labels have that clearly highlighted. She was Australian, living in the Netherlands, so she couldn't read the word sinaasappel, which is Dutch for orange. So I had to read the labels every now and then, as a good boyfriend does. Not super annoying, but I thought, maybe there's something I can do here. And there was a WWDC session about real-time text recognition. It had just come out. It was meant for like scanning a business card or something. So I took the sample project and the code where they check for a number, I just put the word sinaasappel. Yeah, basically just took this sample project, didn't do anything else. A very nicely cropped video. And you can see here it was actually scanning for the word milk. Obviously not something you would ship, but this proved to me, hey, it's possible to make something that does this functionality. She could just point it at the label, it would highlight if there's sinaasappel or not. So, phase one, complete. Okay, there's something here. Problem, the relationship ended, so the motivation also ended. But I thought, okay, let's try to see if I can do something with this. And at that point, I just started doing freelance work, and then Corona came, and I was doing a gig for a hotel, and that all got postponed and canceled. So I had some free time, and I figured, okay, I made this for her, but there's people with a lot of different allergies. Let me just make something that's, yeah, works with different types of allergies. I got all these labels from different products across different countries so that I could test it out. And as you can see here, I was testing all these different ideas. And you could already see the trap I'm falling into where I'm doing design changes in this phase. Like, you've already seen like 4 or 5 different design directions without me having any feedback from users. So what I did after a while is I posted it into this Facebook group with people with peanut allergies. Great response. I was like, all right, here's something I made. And all these people were saying, oh, this is going to be life-changing. It's so annoying to go to the supermarket every day. So then I just asked them for feedback. And they said, okay, what should I make? And eventually the version I sent to them was much more clean and not a lot of stuff going on. It's just very clear, is there something in there you cannot have? And I just grabbed some list of allergies from a website, put those in without really testing it. But it was just to get the idea. I didn't really need to make the full app work yet. I just needed to make something that will be useful for people. And then in the end, I spent a little bit more, a few weeks. So this was before it was 222. Here it was more like 20 hours, 20 days, 4 months or something. So I was still narrowing down the formula, but that doesn't sound as nice as 222. But in the end, it became this really useful app for people. Got featured by Apple. It was the first app that got featured. So I was like, oh, okay, there's something really nice going on here. And it was helping people, and it was also helping me in a way, because I was learning a lot of development stuff, and I got a lot of really nice response from people. So it was very motivating for me to keep working on stuff that I really liked. So I chose to stop doing freelance work and really try to go into this direction. And then I started sharing it once the real version came out, and I put it on Reddit. And I got all these really, really nice responses from people saying, like, what could be improved, giving feedback, explaining how they would actually use it, to people saying, hey, I want to translate this to a different language for you, people giving feedback. But the nice thing is when you make something that actually helps people, people want to help as well. So after a week, I had the app localized into 20 different languages, which is cool, but it's also useful because you get featured by Apple, because your app is more useful for more people, become app of the day at some point even. So all these things wasn't like the big plan. It's more like I want to make something that's useful. People ask me, okay, can you add this? It's a small effort. And so because I started very simple and small, it was easier for me to then add stuff afterwards, because I didn't know all these things when I started, because I didn't have any allergies myself. And then also I got these kind of messages where someone said they're a blind vegan, so this app would literally be life-changing, because before that they would, just not be able to do this. And yeah, it was just me making something for fun based on a sample project. And the reason, so I said I started from a sample project, and you can still see it now. This is a screenshot from the app not too long ago, and the project name is still called CloudKit UI Test. I tried to change it at some point, but as some of you probably know, if you change the project there, everything breaks. And there's ways to do it, but it was too difficult for me at the time, so I figured, okay, this is just a nice little legacy thing in there. But I think it's also a good sign not to overthink it too much, because you don't know where the app is going to go when you start it. Don't have this big, amazing vision of where you're going to go when you haven't shipped anything yet. Like when you haven't made your first app, keep it super small. Second app I want to talk about is PosturePal. And does anyone know what this thing is? It's an upright go, and you basically stick it, or the old version, you stick it to your back, and then whenever your posture goes bad, it would vibrate. I thought, oh, it's very cool. In reality, it feels very much like you're a robot, and people look at you weird because there's this thing stuck on the back of your neck. But then I thought, okay, isn't there something else that's less, feels less robotic, it's more accepted? And obviously, AirPods, everyone has them on. Even sometimes you see people wearing them when they're having a conversation with someone else. And then when Apple released spatial audio, they also opened up the APIs for getting the motion data from these AirPods. So what I did is went to the APIs again, and there's this CM headphone motion manager. And then I found this GitHub project where someone implemented the CM headphone motion manager, and I basically made version 1 of PosturePal in 2 minutes, which basically just was tracking my AirPods movement and would just say posture is good or posture is bad based on how far I was tilting. And that was enough for me to prove, hey, there is something that I can do here. It's possible. Obviously, you need to make it fun as well. So I had this little emoji that would rotate. You could choose different emojis. And then I fell into the trap again because I thought, oh, they need to be 3D, learn Blender, AR, moving along with you. So this was in October and ended up not doing anything until March the next year. When in March, basically, I said, okay, need to start again. First version is just this. It was already useful. I could already share it with people. It worked. Obviously, not great, but it got the job done. It would play a sound when your posture was bad. I could keep using it like that forever. But obviously, you want to do some design. So how I usually do design at the start of a project is I go to Dribbble, which is this website where people share mobile designs. And I just type in whatever I want to get inspired by. So in this case, sport tracking apps. And then you just get all these examples. And what I do is I just go through them and just, for each design, say 3 things I like and 3 things I don't like. Which gives me a very clear start. Like, hey, I like these 8 different elements. All right, let me just use that as the foundation for whatever my design is going to be. So in case of PosturePal, I wanted it to be pretty clean. So I ended up taking this one here on the right. And came up with this newer, simpler design, but I wasn't feeling it yet. So I searched for a little bit longer until I found Ravi, Ravi the little giraffe, and I basically just took Ravi's head and turned it around to make him sad. I'm not sure. Sad Ravi is not. He's over there. So the first version was literally just me copying the mouth and rotating it upside down. But now you have Ravi moving along with you, so it's a very playful way of showing what's going on and guiding you, making you more aware of it. Because with something like this, it's not about being the perfect posture trainer. No, it's making you more aware of it and then improving it over time. And he makes these little squeaky sounds. So it's quite fun. So you had this upright go, which here in Singapore costs 120 euros, dollars. And I could make something that's $3. So even if it's not exactly the same or not better, well, in many cases it's actually better because it tracks from a different position, so it has more information about your head movement. So obviously there's a lot of value there already. And then when Swift Charts came out, what I did is I made this GitHub repo to learn how to use the Swift Charts API. And the nice thing is there, people were also adding charts examples so that I could learn from what other people were doing. And so I was able to add these charts really quickly just by trying to come up with, okay, what apps can I put these new APIs in? Added some more characters. This is Paca the llama. And then all of a sudden, I launched it in April. Back then, I was in Thailand for a few months. And then it was featured on the homepage of the Chinese App Store. And I found out during WWDC that it was actually the app of the month in China, which I think is a pretty big deal because there's 12 months. Yeah. So yeah, it was quite surprising. It was not my plan from the start. I even got this little Ravi doll made. So yeah, it was just a really fun, playful thing that started with just, okay, that simple project with the bad or good. when you make a lot of apps, you probably are familiar with these icons here, the placeholder ones. When you make as many as I do, your whole screens are just filled with those. So I thought, okay, maybe there's this way I can fix that for myself. So I put out this tweet in the morning. Hey, I made this little app. You basically choose a color and an SF symbol, and then it generates an Xcode app icon.assets file that you can just drag in. Because I was doing this in Sketch every time, so it would just save me 20 seconds or something. But yeah, I thought maybe if I have this problem, other people will probably have it as well. This was actually an interesting one, because I started in the morning, and at 12 o'clock that night it was approved, and it was live in the store. With some bugs. Apparently all the sizes were double what they needed to be, so I did a few more updates throughout the week. But over time, it like added emojis, became more useful for people. So I did about like 10 updates in a week or something, added some color stuff, added all these things that were not the focus and were not as well implemented as the other stuff. But it's been featured on the main developer page in the App Store for the last year. So it has this very clear, it solves this very clear problem that I had, and that probably a lot of you also have. So just keep it at that. But the problem for me now is that I opened it the last 2 weeks, and as you can see, it doesn't really work anymore. There's like some stuff going on here, and this is because I have a lot of colors, so for most users this doesn't happen. But because I added all these other things, I fell into this trap again where I stopped like iterating on it. So this is the big announcement of Bakery 3 that's coming out later this year, which is going to go back to the focus, just have just emojis, just SF symbols, not do anything too crazy, because I noticed it was holding me back. So what I do a lot of times is I go through the documentation when WWDC, during the week of WWDC, to see what kind of APIs are released. There's this really nice overview of all the technologies, and you can do this diff between the old version of iOS and the new one, and you can see all the new APIs that were added. And the nice thing here is that you can come across all these APIs that you otherwise wouldn't run into. And one of the ones I found was mix to telephony uplink. Does anyone know what that does? You shouldn't know, because it's not a very... Oh, okay, before this, yeah. So basically what it allows you to do is you have the text-to-speech synthesizer in iOS, and it allows you to put that speech output into a phone call. So I'm not sure what the intended use for it is, but it's more you have one way of like jacking into the phone call. And I thought there was another hackathon going on at the time. Okay, maybe I can make something for people who are mute, so people who cannot talk. Mostly because I thought it would be cool to try this API, but also like, hey, it would be nice to make something for those people. So during that hackathon day, I basically took very simple SwiftUI views. It looks quite nice, but it's simple grid and everything, where you would just be able to let your phone speak for you on the phone. So if you were mute or had trouble speaking after a surgery or whatever, you could have a conversation. It was really cool, but also because I had done something similar in SUSE a few months before, I was able to copy a lot of the code and get it up and running within a few hours. So that's what I was saying before, with like, even if some of your projects don't go to that ending phase, there's still some code there that you can reuse in the future. And then I thought, maybe I can also do it the other way around, where I can listen to what is being said and then show subtitles, because then it would also become useful for deaf people.
This is Jordi. I am mute and cannot talk, so my phone is talking for me.
And that worked in a certain scenario, but in real life it didn't work. But it was still a really nice app that I got some really nice messages from people. I learned a lot, and it was just a fun thing to work on. But then WWDC 2021 came, and one of the new APIs was announced was group activities, or SharePlay. And I wasn't super interested in it, so I watched the session on Friday morning, and then I thought, hey, maybe I can use this technology to actually make that other thing the subtitles thing. So I reached out to one of the presenters from the talk, saying, hey, is there still slots for the labs later today, because they were already closed. And I was able to get a slot. And the next day, I was able to take some of the code from Unmute and basically make a version where you would have a FaceTime conversation with someone, and whatever they're saying, you would see as subtitles. So you can imagine if you're deaf, you can still then have a FaceTime conversation. So this took a bit more than 2 hours, but like 18 hours maybe. But I was able to prove, hey, I can make an app that adds subtitles to FaceTime. Same demo, but yeah, a bit more advanced. And initially, I couldn't get it to work on Mac, but then all of a sudden, I had this epiphany. So I would be saying this sentence into the mic every time I was testing a new build. I started with, we're expecting, fuck, does it work? Yes, yes, it works, holy shit. Then I had a bit of that trap I fall into every time where I just do all these different design iterations, but ended up in the end just keeping it very, very simple. Because I thought it was only going to work on macOS, and obviously the audience is a lot smaller if you cannot support iOS for this. But then someone on Twitter reached out saying, hey, why aren't you also making it on iOS? And then he pointed me to this, I think it's a bug, or it used to be a bug in Apple's API where you were able to somehow change the audio session so that you would have access to the microphone. They unfortunately removed that in iOS 16. But in the end, I was able to make this. Navi is a new app that adds subtitles and live translation to your FaceTime calls. So you can talk to friends, family, or colleagues and see exactly what they're saying.
You can use it to call friends and family with hearing disabilities.
And you can also use it to translate incoming subtitles in your own language.
Met ausländischen Freunden sprechen war nog nie zo einfach.
Of als je partner een andere taal spreekt.
会用你客户的语言来完成商业交易。
So while I wasn't deaf, I could still have the benefit of seeing translations for these incoming subtitles. So you could have a FaceTime call with someone who speaks Spanish, and I could speak Dutch, and they could see what I'm saying, and the other way around. So this was me testing it with my sister, and I was able to actually like overlay it on top of the FaceTime window in macOS as well. Yeah, I hope it gets better before I go back. So this is a very organic conversation. I fly, which I had to do because in April I got a phone call from Apple that I was one of the nominees for an Apple Design Award this year for Navi, which is like one of these life work goals. I thought, maybe when I'm 40. But then it was all of a sudden in April 2021, 22. Which was obviously super crazy to see Navi there up on stage. Unfortunately, didn't win it. So that's what the video was used for, and in the end, my sister was more prominently in the screen than I was, but she's more photogenic than I, so I'm okay with that. But yeah, so I didn't win it, but it's fine. I helped a lot of people, it was nice. But then in iOS 16, so 30 minutes before this event was, the guy from the Twitter message sent me a message saying, hey, yeah, that bug, they fixed it in iOS 16. Had some contact with people within Apple, but it's due to privacy reasons, underlying technology. So it's okay, yeah. It had its moment to shine. And they added some of that stuff into iOS 16, actually, which I spoke to the engineer responsible for that, and he said they started working on it 2 years ago. So they didn't Sherlock me by just copying my code. The last example is actually a combination of examples. So I started working on some Mac apps with Bakery, the app for the icons. And I really liked that when I made Mac apps, I could make tools that would actually help my workflow. So I started working on a bunch of these little tools. And the first one was Forehead, which I released when the new MacBooks came out that had the notch, like the little cutout. I didn't care too much about it, but there was quite some people that were upset about it. So I made a very, very simple app that just puts a black bar at the top, which makes it look like you don't have a notch. People went crazy for it, got all these downloads, just offered it for free. Actually kind of burned myself out that night. I remember working till 2 a.m. because I wanted to release it, and then for the whole week afterwards I was kind of sick. So it's also, you have to be careful there not to chase these things because they're not so important in the end. But I had this itch to keep doing this. So the new MacBooks also had a low power mode that you could toggle when you right-clicked a battery or something. So I thought, I want to have just like a little menu bar icon. But then you would need to use a shortcut to actually toggle the low power mode. So I had to figure out a way to call a shortcut from your app. And then I came across this piece of code on Stack Overflow, which basically allows you to put a terminal, like run a terminal command from an iOS app or from a macOS app. It probably is not meant for that, but that's what I use it for, and it works. So I was all of a sudden now I had this new tool where I could just basically run any terminal command from my app and make it seem like you're just clicking a button in the app. And users would have to install this shortcut, but that basically called the low power mode. So now I had this little thing, and I thought, okay, for Navi, I made this overlay on the FaceTime window. What I find very annoying with the picture-in-picture window is that you cannot like move backwards and forwards on macOS as you can on iOS. So I thought, okay, maybe I can just my own window on top of that, and then call shortcuts that go 15 seconds previous or 50 seconds forward. So basically, 90% of the code for this was already in the previous apps. And then when the MacBooks came out, they also had this issue where sometimes the battery would drain overnight. I'm not sure if anyone ran into that. Apple fixed it, and then the next version also fixed it, and the next version also fixed it. But for me, it wasn't fixed, so I made Bluetooth, which basically turns off your Bluetooth whenever you lock your screen or close your lid. Again, maybe 10% of the work was done in trying to figure out, okay, how can I toggle off Bluetooth? And again, I just went to the shortcut routes and just have a shortcut that runs. Another thing is, once I figured out I can do terminal commands, there was this new terminal command called network quality, where you could basically do a speed test. So I thought, okay, no, I can make a speed test app now. So I could take 90% of all the previous projects, add the new terminal command, and I had a speedy. And then I was doing more stuff with Mac, and I was like, I want to keep doing this. And then I got my new MacBook, and some of you probably recognize this moment when you opened it for the first time and went to an HDR video, and the HDR video is super bright. And I thought, I want that for my entire screen. So I started digging into Metal, the Metal API, because there's a way to do HDR images there. Spent about 2 weeks trying to get it to work. Did not work, and kind of gave up and went to Thailand. But the problem is in Thailand, besides the smudges on my screen, is that it's very sunny there. And if you want to work outside, it's quite hard to do. But I was stuck, I couldn't figure it out, so yeah, it didn't go anywhere. Until I came across Ben. And Ben is another iOS Mac developer. He was actually on the WWDC stage a few years ago with this app Storytime. And I told him, hey, I'm working on something with like transparent HDR videos, trying to trick it. And I think 2 days later, Ben sent me this message saying, dude, relax, don't sweat it, I have it all working, but didn't want to tell you yet until I was away for a few days. So, so Ben found the missing link. And we were actually able to make Vivid, which lets you use the full brightness on your entire screen, as you normally only would with HDR videos. And this was one of those things that, let's start very simple, but then we ended up having to use basically every framework that Apple made in the last 20 years, from Carbon to a lot of stuff that Ben knows and I have no idea about. In the end, you can see the clear difference, so it was very useful for me. And then in the end, we had this really nice product that was useful for people, and we needed to do marketing for it, right? So what I usually do when I make a new app, no matter how small, I just make a little waiting list form in Google Docs. As you can see, these are from a bunch of apps. And the nice thing is that I have to wait for the animation to be over. That's also a very nice thing. It gives me 3 seconds. So before we had finished the app, we already had 618 people on the waiting list. And all those people that had downloaded my Mac apps in the past, all the free ones, I also had their email addresses because I could let them know about new products I was releasing. So at that point, I had 10,000 plus 600 people that I could inform about this thing I made. So my intention wasn't to make money with those other apps because they were just tools and people could pay whatever they want. Some people still paid, which is also really nice. But it also allowed me to reach a broader audience over time by just adding useful things for people. And then I also found out it's quite important to make press kits and to make it easier for press and everything to write about you. So I used this website called Impress Kit. We made this really nice Impress Kit website and then ended up selling Vivid through Gumroad, so because I was using private APIs. And then, I don't know if anyone knows this guy, he has a YouTube channel of about 1 million subscribers. So about a week after it launched, I was in Thailand having dinner with a friend, and then my dad, he got access to my Gumroad account, so he could see how much money was coming in. And he called me, because I had my notifications turned off. And I had sort of a stretch goal.
I have the full version that I purchased, but you can also download the trial. And
I had a stretch goal for Vivid that, it would be great if at the end of the year I can buy a Pro Display XDR, like the big display that also has the full brightness. But yeah, it wasn't really happening based on the first week. But then we kind of made enough to buy 3 in 24 hours, including the stand, which was quite crazy because me and Ben, we thought, okay, this is a fun little thing that we made for ourselves. And unfortunately, I reached out to the guy asking, hey, can you make these videos every day? Would be nice to get 3 Pro Display SDRs every day, but yeah, apparently that's not good for the YouTube algorithm. but it was like such a nice surprise that something that I made for myself and some people, yeah, kind of grew into something that actually made a significant impact on the money I was making. With that being said, there's a 50% discount until tomorrow with code Singapore. Get Vivid.app. And so the last thing I want to talk about, and I kind of hinted at it already, is that a lot of these apps I make are results from combining apps I've made in the past. So a few examples. So for example, Bakery and Vivid, a lot of the code I made there allowed me to make Superstar in a few days. So Superstar is an app that uses the App Store Connect API to basically allow you to reply to them more easily. I could basically start by copying some of the code from Bakery, taking some of the newer, more advanced code I made for Vivid settings window, and get this up and running in a day or so. The code I made for Pippo and Navi allowed me to make Scusi. So together with Hidde, a friend of mine, when you get these audio messages, it's always frustrating when you have to listen to them if someone talks for a minute. So we thought, okay, maybe we can just grab it, drag it in this window that we put on top of iMessage, and then it basically transcribes it by taking Apple's API. Suzy, together with PosturePal, ended up becoming something like Lookie, which is an app I started working on in 2014 during a hackathon where back then there was these machine learning that you could do the image recognition stuff. So I made an app that you could, together with a friend, where you could like point it at certain things and you would have to capture an apple or you have to find a laptop and it would do image recognition. And this became a lot easier in iOS 15. So these are some of my cousins and they always ask me, do you also make video games? Do you also make video games? So I thought, okay, let me just try to make a video game. So together with Antoine, earlier this year, we released Lookie, which basically is a game where you try to capture real-world objects. And a bunch of this code was basically Susie's code for recognizing text, and basically all the settings and everything I just copied from PosturePal, and a lot of code was reused, and a lot of stuff went into this. But yeah, it's like I made a game, and I mostly made it because during Christmas, all my cousins were running around the house, putting cutlery in place, which was like, that's the end goal for me. Like, I don't care if no one else downloads it. This was already what I wanted to do it for. But I learned so much in the process, and it's fun for other people as well. And then to wrap it up, the new iPhone came out, had this dynamic island, and I wanted to know, okay, what can you do with the dynamic island? So I made another repository on GitHub, which basically has all these examples of like what you can do with the dynamic island. And I kind of realized that there's some limitations, but within the limitations, you could still make nice timer apps. So I thought, okay, why am I not going to be the one that makes a timer app for the dynamic island? Which ended up being sticky timers, very basic, but a lot of people like it. It brings in some money. It was fun for me to work on. I managed to like recreate my whole settings screen and my paywall screen that I can now use in all my other screens because I can use all the new APIs. Which one is this? Ooh, yeah, almost forgot about this one. So ChatGPT came out in December, and what I did is I took the code from this project I had that basically was a picture-in-picture browser. So this was all the code, this 40 lines. And all I did basically was put chat.openai.com there. And you would have ChatGPT in your menu bar. Put it on the website for free. I told people you can donate some money if you want, so I can buy a Christmas tree for myself and for my parents. And it's a free app. But I made 3,000 euros in the last 30 days because people, for some reason, want to pay 20 euros for this. Obviously not the goal, but I bought a lot of Christmas trees this year. And something similar happened when I was playing around with that API. I came up with some testing apps I used to test, like, all right, this is the prompt and this is the output, so I could see what it would respond. And I figured, yeah, maybe that should just be a very simple app again. So I took 90% of the code of Bakery, just have a list on the left side where you put your prompts and use the GPT API, and you can use the GPT API in your app. And then I thought, hey, maybe I can use this code in Superstar. So I copied code, 2 minutes later, put in a prompt so that it can now like write an automatic response to your App Store reviews. So these are not like crazy things, because it's just copying code I've made before. And now I actually worked on it some more, so now you can have like fake conversations with fake Steve Jobs and Kanye West, and it's actually really fun. So I'm just now developing it further because I want to use it myself. So I recently started doing some YouTube stuff. So I have a video on my YouTube channel where I go basically over the first 30 minutes of what my process looks like for this app I never ended up shipping because, yeah, after the second day I found out, yeah, it's not a good app. But I think it's a good start if you want to get more into just doing small stuff and keeping it small for yourself, because there's some very clear things you can do by just saying, hey, I'm not going to do certain things. And I think my main thing is that you should just be releasing your work in progress. You shouldn't wait until it's perfect and shouldn't wait until it's the right thing. You don't know when it's the right thing. And sometimes what's work in progress for you is already super valuable for the people around you. And the nice thing is that there's about 200 people here in this room that could be your first beta testers. So share with the people that you meet today and tomorrow what you're working on, and maybe they want to try it out as well. Come up to me if you have some questions. I'm always happy to give feedback on your code, even though I'm not the best programmer. Give feedback on design or whatever, just come up to me. And I'm looking forward to getting some test flight invites over the next few days.